Right. Hi, I'm Joshua East and I'm doing my presentation for inclusive learning. The topic I have chosen is around the topic of disabilities, and specifically I've chosen ADHD in a classroom context. I'm also here with several pre-service teachers and they'll be contributing to the conversation. So, first of all, the purpose of this presentation, it will be based on topic 4 for EDN 509, learning difficulties and learning disorders. I would like to increase pre-service teachers and teachers' knowledge of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. I will aim to provide teachers with strategies to improve their ability to meet the needs of ADHD students. And the main objective is to encourage inclusive ways for educating in classrooms containing ADHD. I will say that the things that I've chosen are, a lot of the things that I've chosen are to do first around what ADHD is, and towards the end of the presentation I specifically talk about strategies for inclusive learning. And the order of the presentation is like this. So we have, first of all, I've already discussed the activities with the pre-service teachers in front of me. The activity will be, I have a list of the symptoms for ADHD, and we'll go through those symptoms and how we could use specific strategies in order to find ways to learn inclusively. What is ADHD? I'll go into specifics of that. I have a video with a person, a TED Talk with a person who has ADHD, and he speaks about difference and deficit and what might the what could that mean. I will go into public perception, medication. We'll go through the activity, and then we'll talk about the case studies. So like I said, the activity I planned at the end of the presentation is to reimagine ways that class could be taught to assist those with ADHD. So right now, for the people in front of me, I'd like you guys to think of maybe classroom situations where you've had someone that, that's maybe hyperactive, they can't focus, maybe not necessarily a ADHD student, but it's just a good place to start. And maybe a particular lesson I've written here, you might want to draw upon. And one of the main focuses is, how do we include everyone in a classroom? So first of all, what is ADHD? I just wanted to ask, you guys in front of you, what do you know of ADHD? Do you know anything about ADHD?
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder?
Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah?
Yep, okay, we've got nods.
Are they people who are super hyper, can't concentrate in class?
Okay, do you see much the same?
Yeah. I do know there are different subtypes of it. So
yeah.
There's the one that everyone would think of being hyperactive, can't focus,
yep.
or being overactive either mentally or physically, whether they can't keep still or they just can't stop thinking. But there's also the inattentive types that don't include any forms of hyperactivity, where they just can't focus, and they actually can have ADHD but without having any hyperactivity. Is that right?
Yes, alright, that's right. What I'd say is, what do you guys think of when you think of an ADHD student, like off the top of your head?
Fidgety.
Fidgety, like, okay, fidgety.
Disruptive,
right. So our perception of ADHD is ultimately fairly negative on students, and as I'll go throughout the presentation, that directly impacts the way that we might aim to teach someone, or just our perception when we enter the classroom and we have someone who's fidgety. They sort of like they might feel like they're in our way, and as teachers, like if we come into a classroom thinking like that, how that can be to the detriment of that student's learning and maybe the detriment of other students in the class. So specifically, a child with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder finds it hard to pay attention, be organised, think slowly and sit still. Doctors and psychologists need to do a complex assessment before they can diagnose ADHD. Different techniques and sometimes medication can help children with ADHD. So the questions I've got is about, why is there a struggle to inclusively teach ADHD? Can you guys think of anything? Why is there a struggle to incorporate students with ADHD in a classroom?
probably because the definition of ADHD is so loose.
Yeah.
There is no one category that sort of defines every person that would have ADHD, and they all have different, varying degrees of being hyperactive
specific
or inattentive
needs.
or disorganized.
Yeah. What do you think? No, you're not sure? That's fine. So I think this question is sort of more guided on the fact that, you can have a normal class, and then there's maybe a student that can't concentrate, and you need to find specific ways to address that one student. But that one student has individual needs. That's probably been a main focus of much of our diploma of education, is how students have individual needs, and you need to address it. How does society think about those with ADHD? Maybe you can comment on maybe what your parents have told you, if you they've said something about ADHD, or what other people have said about the children with ADHD.
Tend to be dropouts, I suppose.
Dropouts, yeah.
My mum thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely negative.
Negative.
They're not thought to excel, really.
They're not thought to excel. Have you heard of parents, teachers, people saying that ADHD doesn't exist?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
They said it's just
Sugar or something. Yeah. People, they just, something, basically.
way to label your kids as well. Just another fad.
It's a fad. It's maybe over-diagnosed.
Yeah.
I actually get into that issue, and it's important on the topic of inclusivity, because public perception is huge. If you've got parents, teachers, students alike who don't value or don't accept the struggles that a particular student might have in your classroom, you're already in a bad situation to try and teach them inclusively. So I've got here DSM-5. This is a medical. Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. That is a medical book journal, and that's how basically mental disorders or behavioural disorders are diagnosed, because in many ways you can't just stick a person into a machine. They have to be diagnosed in front of a professional. So I'll tell you why in a second. To be diagnosed with ADHD, children must have 6 or more of the 9 characteristics, and older teens or adults must have at least 5 of the 9 characteristics in either or both DSM-5 categories listed below. There are no physical tests to diagnose ADHD. Only a qualified professional can, such as a doctor. Alright, so some of the qualities I've got here are: fail to give close attention to detail, has difficulty sustaining attention, does not appear to listen, struggles to follow through on instructions, has difficulty with organisation, avoids or dislikes tasks requiring sustained mental effort, loses things, is easily distracted, is easily forgetful in daily activities. Then there's another category, fidgets with hands or squirms, has difficulty remaining seated, runs about or climbs excessively, acts as if driven by a motor. Adults will often feel internally as if they were driven by a motor. So obviously it manifests differently in children and in adults. Obviously, because we're doing education, we're looking at children to people, young people anyway. Talks excessively, blurts out answers, difficulty waiting or taking turns, interrupts or intrudes upon others. And then, so there were the 2 different types. And then the last one is combined presentation. So they're the 2 different ways it manifests. Something I'll say before we go into the video is that a lot of those qualities are qualities I would recognise in a lot of students who aren't diagnosed with ADHD. Fidgety, can't concentrate. So we're looking at the extent to which someone can't concentrate on a topic or is hyperactive, fidgety. So, a question that might come up is like, how are they actually different to any child that you have in your class? So now I will play the video.
camera operator, an airbrush artist, a physicist, a stargazer, a rock climber, a snowboarder, a model maker, a stage manager, a camp counselor, a PA, a DJ, a club president, a magician, and for a brief stint in May of 2012, I was called upon to repair 2 stopwatches which had stopped working. Who am I, you ask? My name is Stephen Tonti, and I have ADHD. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, and I was first diagnosed with ADHD, not by a diagnostician, or a private practice, or a pediatrician, but by a second-grade teacher who was interviewing me for a spot at the school she was working at. Now, you see, my family had just moved from New Orleans, Louisiana to Dallas, Texas, and I was in a search for a new academic home. Now, during this particular interview, this particular teacher received a message ahead of time from my first-grade teacher back in New Orleans to check me for any signs of ADHD. And just as she reached the series of questions devised to evaluate whether a child between the ages of 5 and 17 is ADHD, wham! I fell out of my chair. No, I didn't slip. And no, the chair didn't crumble beneath me. You see, behind the teacher's desk was this giant window. And through that window was a giant field. And on that field were what appeared to me at the time to be hundreds of thousands of kids my age. And they were all playing with a great, big, inflatable rainbow beach ball. And as they played and moved all around the field, it was all I could do to keep track of them. So I leaned a little bit to the left, and I leaned a little bit to the right, and I leaned a little bit more to the left, and a little bit more to the right before disaster. I still maintain today that window was a trap and I was set up. So I was rejected from middle school because I was an 8-year-old boy who couldn't sit still in his chair. Oh, and there was this complex marshmallow-related incident between myself and some of the staff there. But anyway, I ended up at the Episcopal School of Dallas, and over the next 11 years, I tried everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Extracurriculars. I tried computing, robotics, carpentry, canoeing, rock climbing, poetry club, logic club, poker club, comedy club, and camping. I went camping at least twice a year for 4 years, and band. Oh my God. I tried the trumpet, the saxophone, the piano, the electric bass, the stand-up bass, the guitar, both acoustic, and did I mention I played sports? It was Texas. We played sports. I tried all of them. And the drums. And I even took a short-lived stab at the harp. I played 7 different instruments. Played being a very generous term. When all of a sudden my school built a theater, and I thought, why not? So I started in the shop building sets, and then I moved to the sound booth, and then the light booth, and then my teacher asked me to act, so I played Conrad in Ordinary People. And then I said, can I direct? And she said, go for it. So I directed 12 Angry Jurors, because this is high school, people, and you can't direct 12 angry men with a drama school that has 3 boys and 4 girls. Yes, for the people doing the math at home, that's 7 drama students for a show in a 12-minute. And before I knew it, I was auditioning and interviewing at drama schools across the country. And that's when Carnegie Mellon found me. And I love it here. I really do.
Okay, just that first part. What kind of impression do you get now of someone who has ADHD?
They're constantly changing to do new things.
Yeah.
You can never settle in one interest.
Yeah. One interest, would you add to that, or do you see much the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something that I see in that is it's not necessarily someone who isn't driven to succeed or to do well, to achieve in a classroom setting. It's someone who actually has difficulties just focusing on these things. But when there's something that, in this guy's case, gauges his interest, he's able to focus on it, and he's actually able to do quite well. So I'll keep playing.
But moving on. So what? So I have ADHD. And ADHD is misunderstood as an inability to focus, but it's much stranger than that. It's not a lack of focus, period. It's that I have a hard time selecting something and giving it my full attention. Something has to grab my attention, pique my curiosity, and then I can hyper-focus. Now this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because I have a hard time completing things that don't excite me. And we live in a world where you have to read your textbooks and pay your taxes. And yes, big textbooks with no pictures frighten me. And no one likes handling taxes. Well, actually, some people might like that. But the upside is, when something does pique my curiosity, I become obsessed and I hyper-focus. I spend a lot of time with film. I I can spend upwards of 12 hours in a row editing clips, sometimes until 6:30 in the morning. In the theater, when I have to put a show up, I'll pull 15-hour days for weeks on end, and I enjoy that. I love that. I can read a 500-page novel that I love much faster than a one-page article I don't care for. It's easier for me to see the big picture. As a director, I have to track 20 people with very different jobs, from designers to writers to actors, and I find handling that much easier than finishing that one-page article. I'm still working. David Nealman, the founder and CEO of JetBlue, who is also ADHD-minded, says, I have a hard time doing the mundane things in life. I have an easier time planning a 20-aircraft fleet than I do paying my light bill.
Just to add to that, it's interesting the way he talks about all the things he's involved in, but not only does he talk about how passionately he's involved in, he also seems to be quite skillful. And looking at it, you would assume as much. So you get the impression, which it didn't seem that you guys got from the start, that ADHD students aren't necessarily students who are just lazy, perhaps. I know you didn't say that, but it's a common perception. Lazy or, just bad at school. I will go on to say that statistically, it shows that a lot of ADHD students do suffer from learning disabilities or are more susceptible to learning disabilities because they can't be engaged. But as far as us as teachers, it's not simply from a point of view that they can't engage at all. It comes from the fact that they need to be exhilarated and they need to be able to engage in the things that they draw themselves to. So it's just something to think about as well in your own teaching, that these people who have ADHD aren't necessarily lazy. They probably are trying, but they need that specific thing to gauge them, and maybe that will something that you consider in your teaching anyway.
Yeah. So another good thing about ADHD is, because I felt compelled to try everything, I was able to explore all the possible career paths I might not have and might not have discovered what I truly want to do. So many teens and young adults are expected to focus on one or two fields of study and one or two hobbies, and hope and pray they like the ones they've chosen or that have been chosen for them. My job is to tell other people's stories, and I find an easier time doing that when I can draw from all of these other perspectives. It's easier for me to see the world through the eyes of a drummer because I've tried that. It's easier for me to see the world through the eyes of a graphic designer because I've tried that too. ADHD is a difference in cognition, not simply a disorder. We are attention different, not attention deficit. But because it is treated and misunderstood...
So quickly, he says that attention different, not attention deficit. What do you think he means by that?
Well, he said that he can be inattentive in some areas but hyper-focused in others.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the point being is our perception is that often the ADHD students...
Sorry.
That's all right. Lack in several ways. They're lacking.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. So of a deficit, when we think of a deficit, we think of being insufficient at something. In his example, that's not necessarily the case. It's not someone who is insufficient. They're just different in the way they process things, the way that they seek information. So in his case, he's saying that he could achieve a lot of things by doing things in his particular way, by learning in a way that best fit him. And as we go on with the strategies further on, we'll look at ways that you can do that.
A disorder, it's treated as something that needs fixing. So the idea seems to be that we need to get rid of my ADHD. But there's no getting rid of it, there's just sedating it. I was lucky. My high school teachers were hip, young progressives who were delighted to give me extra time, the additional attention, and the overall freedom to express myself the way that I felt necessary. So many other kids with ADHD aren't as lucky. For example, my roommate. Adam has been my roommate for 4 years. He is an excellent actor at the School of Drama and a brilliant thinker. We both grew up in Dallas, Texas, and we both have ADHD. Adam's high school was different. Now, even though he grew up only 15 minutes north of me, Adam's high school had harsher penalties for falling out of your chair. Now, you see, when you're a kid diagnosed with ADHD, your doctor administers a series of amphetamines and bring weights, because no one has a clue how you'll react. You might get more calm. You might become depressed. You might lash out at the people around you. Now, the difference between Adam and me is when new medication may cause me to act out, my teachers immediately advise my doctors that I change my medication. However, when Adam tried a new medication, his teachers wrote this in his report. Adam is less motivated, less animated, and less involved in class activities, but at least he's quiet now.
Okay, and that's probably the main point about inclusive learning, and it's been the point of what I've been trying to say up to now, and what I'll continue to say. A lot of it is about public perception of what the disorder is, and how teachers should be dealing with it in a classroom. And I even say dealing with it, I don't mean. It's about individually looking at the student and seeing what ways you can best make them, seek or achieve what they want to achieve. And those are the two extremes there. So like teachers who are really encouraging and can let him do drama at his school, or lighting, or IT, or whatever he talked about, and then the other teachers that just said at least he's quiet now. And our goal as teachers, I believe, would be closer to the first one, where we're looking at encouraging, finding new ways, new strategies to include a ADHD student so that they can excel as he has, and that they don't have to go through the hardship that his friend had.
We need a healthier understanding of people with ADHD, and it starts at home. I had a mother and a father who supported every obsession. I distinctly recall my father asking one day, "Son, you're only 14. What could you possibly want with this air compressor?" To which I responded, "I want to airbrush t-shirts and shorts and sell them to my classmates and friends." All right then. And he would go out and he would get it, and I would play with it, and I would obsess over it. During the summers when I went off my medication and my body was wrecked with the effects of withdrawal, my mother sat by my side, literally coaxing the migraines out of me. With their support, I was able to explore, and my obsessions grew and multiplied, and I was able to maintain my sanity. Schools need to develop a better attitude towards students with ADHD as well, and there are plenty of examples out there. For instance, the Eagle Hill School in Harvard, Massachusetts. The Eagle Hill School believes that every student can learn, that learning differently requires teaching differently, and that we must educate our kids, our students, to learn about learning in order to form new beliefs in a search for intellectual autonomy. Professors who act more as mentors as opposed to disciplinarians inspire me. When teachers level with me, I feel like I'm more in control, that there's a dialogue regarding new ways of thinking and approaching a problem, focusing, completing tasks. We have to create and develop a healthier relationship with medication. I think that Ritalin, Adderall, Concerta should only be prescribed to someone who can physically handle the effects of these drugs and their withdrawal. 12 is far too young. 16 is still too young. There are so many alternatives to medication. Studies have shown that for some, it's just an added weight or pressure to help them focus.
I'd like to mention at this stage that that's his opinion. In the research that I've done, there's been many cases where medication has helped. So the drug Ritalin, which I'll talk about a bit later, works on making the parts of the brain which help concentration, like they stimulate the parts of the brain that help to concentrate. So for kids that find themselves wandering around, that can help them. And there's also a lot of research going into those drugs. That medication. So I just wanted to say that because that's his opinion. As teachers, it's important for us to know that there are alternatives to medication, that you're not trying to fix a child, but at the same regard, you need to think about what's actually best for that child, for their learning and for their integration into the classroom. So I just wanted to say that because from my readings, I don't necessarily agree with what he said. But as an ADHD person himself, he had experience, and medication of him was the wrong way to go. So just something to keep in mind.
And these things exist. There are weighted paths that help people feel more comfortable so they can complete tasks on time. For some people, it's tics like chewing pencils. So give them rubber-coated pencils. We have to teach kids to teach themselves. It's the best thing that we can do for our kids. And lastly, our society has to embrace cognitive diversity. For example, Special Easter, or The Specialists, is a Danish organization that trains people with autism and ADHD as consultants in IT and other more technically oriented tasks and jobs. We have to turn this joke around on those who believe that my disorder divides me from my more normal peers. Besides, who here at Carnegie Mellon really qualifies as normal anyway? A great author, a masterful playwright, and a sublime poet once writ. Any guesses as to who I speak of? Shakespeare. Thou art correct. Shakespeare's Sonnet 121. "'Tis better to be vile than vile esteemed, when not to be receives reproach of being, and the just pleasure lost, which is so deemed not by our feelings, but by others' seeming. For why should others' false adulterate eyes give salutation to my sported blood? Or, on my frailties, why are frailer spies, which in their wills count bad what I think good? Nay, I am that I am. They that level at my abuses reckon up their own. I may be straight, though they themselves be beveled. By their rank thoughts, my deeds must not be shown, unless this general evil they all maintain. All men are bad, and in their badness reign." In Sonnet 121, Shakespeare condemns hypocrisy. He implores us not to let others' false adulterate eyes condemn us for something they believe us to be. He begs you not to let the selfish and negative comments of others hinder the just pleasures owed to you. A hierarchy of frailer spies have asked me to conform to society's means, and I propose the opposite. I propose let society conform to me, and I implore you to do the same. I'll leave you with something that Robin Williams, a poster child for us in the ADHD community, once said. "We are all only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't